A single drop of crimson splashed onto my college acceptance letter, transforming the white paper into something else entirely. My stepfather Russell's reflection appeared in my bedroom mirror, his knuckles still clenched from the backhand that had split my lip. Behind him, my mother Olivia swayed slightly in the doorway, wineglass clutched in her manicured fingers. "Harvard?" Russell spat, kicking the fallen letter. "You think we're going to waste money sending worthless trash like you to college? That trust fund is for real family, not some burden we've been stuck with." The taste of copper filled my mouth, but it wasn't the pain that made my vision tunnel. It was the word trust fund, confirmation of what I'd suspected since finding those documents hidden in their filing cabinet last week. My dead father's money wasn't gone. They'd been stealing it all along. My name is Patricia. I'm 18 and about to become my own liberator. This is the story of how I turned years of hidden evidence into the ultimate family reckoning. For 3 years, I'd been documenting everything, photographing bruises with the library's digital camera, saving threatening texts they thought were deleted, recording conversations during their drunken rages. I'd been secretly uploading everything to a password-protected cloud account they knew nothing about, ensuring they could never find or destroy the evidence. The bruises on my ribs from last week's lesson still ached as I knelt to retrieve my acceptance letter, now stained with evidence of today's discipline. "You're pathetic," Olivia slurred from the doorway, swirling her third glass of Cabernet. 18 years old and you still can't take a simple correction without bleeding everywhere. No wonder your real father ran that car off the road. Probably couldn't stand the thought of raising something like you. The familiar lie landed differently this time. I'd known for years that my father hadn't abandoned me in a car accident as they claimed. The death certificate I'd found during a secret records search confirmed he'd been hit by a drunk driver while parked at a rest stop. But what Olivia didn't know was that my grandmother had been silently watching, documenting, preparing. Russell's hulking frame blocked my doorway, his construction worker's shoulders nearly touching both sides of the frame. "You've got 30 minutes to get your worthless hide out of my house. And don't think about coming back when reality hits. You made your choice." My choice. As if turning 18 and legally escaping their daily torment was somehow an act of rebellion rather than survival. The fresh bruises on my arms throbbed as I lifted my battered suitcase from under the bed, each mark a testimony to the years I'd endured waiting for this moment. "Where are you even going to go?" Olivia laughed, the sound like glass shattering. "You think that minimum wage library job is going to pay for an apartment? You'll be sleeping under bridges within a week." I thought about the letter hidden in my backpack, the one from Neville, Radcliffe, and Associates that had arrived yesterday while they were out, the one that began, "Dear Ms. Evans, we regret to inform you of your grandmother's passing, but are pleased to execute her final wishes regarding your inheritance." "I'll figure it out," I said quietly, shouldering my backpack with the letter that would change everything. Russell snorted. "Yeah, right. Kids like you don't figure out nothing. You're weak, just like your dead daddy was. That's why he couldn't handle a simple car ride without screwing it up." The cruelty in his words was designed to break me one final time before I left, but I'd moved beyond breaking. I'd spent too many nights researching inheritance law at the library, too many hours planning for this exact moment. "Goodbye, Mom," I said, meeting her bloodshot eyes. "Goodbye, Russell." Olivia's expression flickered, perhaps surprised by my calm tone, the lack of tears or pleading they'd grown accustomed to extracting from me. "Don't call here," she warned, gripping the doorframe for balance. "Don't write. You're not our problem anymore." "No," I agreed, walking past them toward the front door. "I'm not your problem, but you might become mine." The door closed behind me with a finality that should have been terrifying. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, hope mixed with anticipation. The evening air cooled the swelling around my eye as I walked toward the bus stop, each step taking me further from hell and closer to the truth about my grandmother's legacy. I had just enough cash saved from my library job to cover one night at the Sunset Motel on the edge of town, where I'd stay until I could meet with the lawyers tomorrow morning. The law office of Neville, Radcliffe, and Associates occupied an entire floor of downtown's most prestigious building. I sat in their waiting room the next morning, still wearing yesterday's clothes after spending the night in the cheap motel, reading and rereading the inheritance documents. Miss Evans? A distinguished woman in her 50s emerged from an office. I'm Vanessa Neville. Thank you for coming so quickly. Her office was warm and professional, nothing like the sterile government buildings where I'd occasionally been interviewed about my home situation over the years. Interviews where I'd learned to lie convincingly to protect myself from even worse retaliation. I have to admit, Ms. Neville began, settling behind her desk, your grandmother left very specific instructions about how to handle this inheritance. She was quite concerned about your family's situation. My throat tightened. She knew. Patricia, your grandmother hired private investigators 3 years ago when she noticed inconsistencies in your mother's explanations about your injuries during family visits. She'd seen the bruises you tried to hide during holiday gatherings and recognized the signs of abuse from her work with domestic violence shelters. She documented everything: medical records, school reports, photographs of bruises your mother claimed were from clumsiness. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Grandma had known and had been building a case, gathering evidence while I suffered in silence. The inheritance is substantial, Ms. Neville continued, sliding a thick folder across her desk. Evans Enterprises is worth approximately $47 million. Your grandmother built it from a small textile business into a diversified company with real estate holdings, manufacturing contracts, and investment portfolios. $47 million. The number was so large it felt abstract, like reading about fictional wealth in a novel. There are conditions, she continued. First, you must complete high school or obtain your GED within 2 years. Second, you must undergo counseling to address the trauma you've experienced. Third, you must wait until age 21 to access the principal, but the trust provides you with substantial living allowances and educational funding immediately. I stared at the documents, watching legal language transform my desperate circumstances into something resembling hope. What kind of living allowances? $50,000 per year, plus educational expenses, housing costs, and medical care. Essentially everything you need to build a stable, independent life. The amount was more than Russell made at his construction company, more than Olivia had ever earned in her sporadic employment. It was freedom spelled out in legal terminology and trust fund provisions. But here's where it gets interesting. Ms. Neville's tone shifted, becoming almost conspiratorial. Your grandmother discovered that your mother and stepfather have been committing financial fraud using your identity. Credit cards, loans, even a second mortgage on their house, all using your social security number and forged signatures. My hands clenched involuntarily. Of course they had. The mysterious bills that arrived with my name, the calls from debt collectors that Russell always handled, the way they'd grown more desperate and violent over the past year. The total fraudulent debt is approximately $200,000, she continued. Your grandmother's investigators documented everything. We can have them arrested and prosecuted, or... She paused meaningfully. Or what? Or we can give them a choice. They can sign over their house deed to satisfy the fraudulent debt, accept prosecution for identity theft, or negotiate a settlement that keeps them out of prison but strips them of most assets. The power I'd never possessed suddenly sat heavy in my hands. These people who had hurt me severely and crushed my spirit were now at my mercy. What did my grandmother recommend? I asked softly. Ms. Neville smiled grimly. She left a letter for you. Her exact words were, "Let Patricia decide how much mercy they deserve." That evening, I sat in my new studio apartment, clean, safe, and entirely mine, reading Grandma's final letter. The apartment had been arranged by Ms. Neville's office earlier that day, with the first month's rent paid from my newly accessible trust fund. Her handwriting was familiar from birthday cards and Christmas notes, but her words carried weight I'd never heard before. My dearest Patricia, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're finally free. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you sooner, but I needed legal proof of what they were doing before I could act. You have suffered more than any child should, but you survived with your compassion intact. That makes you stronger than they will ever be. The money is just money, sweetheart. What matters is that you now have choices they stole from you. You can choose revenge or mercy, justice or forgiveness. Choose what helps you heal, not what feeds your anger. The next morning, I called Miss Neville and made my decision. I want them prosecuted for the identity theft and fraud, I said clearly. But I also want to offer them a settlement that allows them to avoid prison if they meet certain conditions. What conditions? Russell attends anger management counseling for 2 years. Olivia goes to rehabilitation for her alcoholism. They surrender the house to pay the fraudulent debt, but I'll provide them with a small rental property, one of my inherited holdings, where they can live affordably while they work on themselves. Ms. Neville was quiet for a moment. That's unexpectedly generous, Patricia. It's not generous, I corrected. It's strategic. If they get help, maybe they'll stop hurting people. If they refuse help, they go to prison. Either way, they can't hurt me anymore. 1 week later, the confrontation happened in Miss Neville's conference room. Russell and Olivia arrived, thinking they were meeting with creditors about their mounting debt. Instead, they found me sitting calmly at a polished table, flanked by lawyers and holding documentation of their crimes. "What is this?" Olivia's voice cracked as she recognized me. "Patricia, what are you doing here?" "I'm here to discuss your future," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded, or rather, your lack of one if you refuse my offer. Russell's face cycled through confusion, anger, and dawning fear as Ms. Neville laid out the evidence of their fraud. Bank records, forged signatures, credit applications, years of financial abuse documented in excruciating detail. "You can't prove we meant to," Russell started. "We can prove everything," I interrupted, sliding forward photographs of my injuries alongside financial documents bearing my forged signature. "The question is whether you want to face criminal charges or accept my settlement offer." Olivia was crying now, ugly sobs that might have moved me a year ago. "Patricia, baby, we were desperate. The bills, the mortgage. We were trying to keep the family together. By stealing my identity and leaving me severely injured?" I asked quietly. "That's an interesting definition of family." The settlement terms were simple. They would surrender their house, enter mandatory counseling, and live in the small rental property I would provide. In exchange, I wouldn't press criminal charges. They had 24 hours to decide. "And if we refuse?" Russell's voice had lost all its bluster. "Then you'll discover what it feels like to be powerless and afraid," I replied, "just like you taught me." They took the settlement. Within a month, they were living in a modest duplex across town, attending court-ordered therapy sessions and working minimum wage jobs to cover their basic expenses. Russell's construction company dropped him when his background check revealed the fraud charges. Olivia lost her part-time retail job when her drinking caused too many missed shifts. The house they'd once owned was sold, with the proceeds covering a portion of the fraudulent debt they'd accumulated in my name. Meanwhile, I enrolled in community college, started seeing a trauma counselor, and slowly began building a life I'd never imagined possible. The inherited business required minimal oversight. Grandma had chosen excellent managers, allowing me to focus on education and healing. 6 months after the settlement, Russell called me. His voice was different, smaller, uncertain. "Patricia, the counselor says I should call you to apologize." I let the silence stretch between us. "I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything," he continued, "but I need you to know I was wrong about everything. The way I treated you, the things I said, you didn't deserve any of it." "No," I agreed. "I didn't." Are you doing okay? With school and everything?" I looked around my apartment. Bookshelves full of textbooks, a desk where I studied without fear of interruption, walls that had never echoed with screams or breaking glass. "I'm doing better than okay," I said. "I'm doing exactly what I was meant to do." "Good," he whispered. That's good." After I hung up, I realized something had shifted inside me. The rage I'd carried for so long was transforming into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but a kind of peace that came from knowing I'd chosen healing over revenge, justice over cruelty. Olivia never called to apologize, but her sister mentioned that she'd been sober for 4 months and was working at a women's shelter, helping other abuse survivors. Perhaps facing the consequences of her actions had forced her to confront the person she'd become. As for Russell and Olivia's marriage, I heard through family connections that they had filed for divorce shortly after moving into the duplex, with the paperwork finalized by the end of that year. As for me, I graduated community college with honors and transferred to a 4-year university to study social work. My inheritance gave me the freedom to choose meaningful work over profitable work, to help other kids like I'd been rather than simply accumulating wealth. On my 21st birthday, I gained full access to the trust fund and immediately established a foundation for abuse survivors. The irony wasn't lost on me. Money that came from the same family system that had nearly destroyed me was now helping other young people escape similar situations. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd chosen pure revenge over measured justice. I could have destroyed them completely, left them homeless and hopeless the way they tried to leave me. But Grandma was right. What helps you heal isn't always what feeds your anger. The best revenge against people who tried to break you isn't becoming like them. It's becoming everything they said you could never be, and then using that success to help others they'll never reach. It's proving that their cruelty created strength, not weakness, and that their worst efforts to diminish you only made you more determined to shine. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles. Zero cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.